Welcome along to another edition of Matchbook's Weekend Football Podcast. Miguel, Delaney, I'll start with you first, mate. It just seems like there's a lot happening. I know you've been a journalist for a good few years now, but this season, amongst any, it's just bang, bang, boom, boom. But let's start with last Sunday at Old Trafford. What were your thoughts there? I know Adrian Clarke has a few thoughts here, because I don't think it was a bad Arsenal performance, but what a start for Anthony. He's worth €100 million, right? He has to be after that.
Well, we still don't know that, I suppose, but certainly, I mean, he at least showed the potential, and the finish was superb. I was trying to think after it went in. There's a specific goal that reminds me of. It might actually have been against Ireland. Basically, one of those moments where a higher quality player suddenly just delivers. But the closest I can think of is Romario. That one kind of coming in and kind of just, slightly curving it into the far corner. It was a lovely finish, and a finish of kind of such accomplishment for a player who, let's be fair, is under a bit of pressure in what had been a daunting situation. Big game at Old Trafford. It was quite a weird one though. Like
he milked it though, Mig, didn't he? He milked that celebration. Was it 5 celebrations in one?
Yeah. Well, that's the modern game now.
Yeah.
But the weird thing is, like, I mean, it was both an alarming performance for Arsenal and actually an encouraging one. If that doesn't sound contradictory, in that I thought in general play they were still excellent, dominated the game, but in terms of cutting edge and I suppose defending, I mean, two quite relevant things. Let's be fair. They were a little bit of a letdown for such a big game, but I think some of that might have been circumstantial.
We backed under 2.5 goals in that game, Adrian Clarke. Obviously, look, we were recording ahead of the Manchester United Leicester game. We didn't have a lot to go on. It was always in trouble, though. I mean, I just thought that Arsenal high line in the second half, especially, it just looked exceptionally vulnerable, which it did do in the end. But let's give some props to Manchester United, because on this show, Adrian, we've been very much against them the last couple of years, but they were clinical on Sunday.
They were good. Yeah, no, I think I wanted both teams to score on that one. I wasn't trusting Arsenal to keep a clean sheet, and I knew they'd score. They almost always score at Old Trafford. But yeah, it was, between both boxes, Arsenal very good. But Manchester United, what impressed me about them, was the aggression. I didn't like it as an Arsenal fan, so to speak, because they roughed up Gabriel Jesus, who handled it well, but there was a clear intent to knock Arsenal around, and I would actually praise them for that, even though I think the referee should have done a little bit more to clamp down on it. I think that shows that they're listening to the manager, that they've got this team ethic going. There's a bit more life in them now. I thought they defended pretty well as a team. Their box, Arsenal had, I think, almost 4 times, certainly 3 times as many touches inside the opposition box as Man United, but they defended that box superbly. Didn't make any real mistakes. And then when Arsenal did leave little holes in central midfield, which is the big worry at the moment because there's no Thomas Partey, boy, did they pick it off brilliantly. I thought it was an incredibly efficient Man United performance. So yeah, look, as much as it gutted me the result, I was impressed by United. They've definitely made a step forward.
Marco here with the sacking of Scott Parker, what feels like about 2 or 3 weeks ago now, but it really isn't. You were one of the kind of few people that went against the grain slightly and said this guy should have been gone after last season, or maybe the season before. And, didn't look too bad last week, did it? Scoring 3 against Forest.
Told you so. 4 points from 2 games. Credit to Gary O'Neill. They're still favourites to finish bottom, and rightfully so. But just huge credit to him for stepping into the breach and getting results against the odds, particularly that Forest game. I know they did score 3 relatively sort of low percentage goals in that game, but I just don't think you can put a number on the sort of emotional impact that might have on him and his squad going into the weekends now. And I'll say it, but I don't see Bournemouth coming back from 2-0 down at Nottingham Forest under Scott Parker. I think he's too much of a pragmatist. He's too cautious. He's too controlling in his team to release the shackles and really go for it. But I think, you can never really put a number on sort of belief and confidence and determination and battle. They're all sort of prerequisites in sport, but we saw that in droves from Bournemouth last weekend. And, they'll go into a game now against Brighton this weekend, possibly without Graham Potter in charge of the Seagulls as well. So there is an opportunity for them to go back to back. It wouldn't be the biggest surprise of the weekend now, would it, if Potter does leave Brighton? So, still, I think the sort of longer term rating of Bournemouth is still to be in the bottom 3, but just big thumbs up to them for the turnaround last week and picking up 4 points against the odds.
Yeah, a lot can change in a couple of days. All right. Best bets last weekend too, Mark. Good job there on Napoli. I know we didn't get the full win. We probably should have. It was 2 3/4 was the total. But Miguel Delaney 4 in a row as well. Under 2.5 in the Wolves game. Yeah, beautiful bet. Beautiful bet, Miguel. All right, we'll move on. 4 Premier League games we're going to discuss today as ever. We've got EFL selections, European selections as well. We're going to start with the big one on Saturday evening in Manchester, Man City against Tottenham. We'll take a look at the betting as we have it on matchbook.com. You can back City here at 1.41. Excuse me, Tottenham at 8.4. The draw available at 5.6. Tottenham getting a goal and a half start at 1.9. That's not a bad bet, I would suggest. 3.25 is the total. That seemed like a high goal line as well. I was shaded towards the under there at 1.84. Mark O'Hare, I've already kind of given the game away. Spurs at the moment, like watching them midweek again, I thought they battled through. Didn't play well against Marseille, but 1-2-0, kind of comfortable enough with the extra man there helps as well. But they have to have a chance to go to Manchester, right? They're probably well set up. Like Conte does like this kind of situation against Pep, especially.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think if you're looking for Man City's main title challengers right now, with Liverpool clearly not convincing, you have to say Spurs are right in the mix, and they've picked up the most points outside of the big two since Conte was appointed. Their XG process has been as strong, if not up on the same sort of levels as the two above. They are third in that sort of rating too since the calendar year started. So things have been going in the right direction. I know they've not completely convinced, but they're a team that can pose problems to Man City. We've seen that both before and after Conte's appointment. They've won 4 of the last 5 meetings in the Premier League, actually, with City. Did the double over them last year. I know some of those games were quite difficult to explain and justify from a Spurs perspective, but they have been used to pinching points against teams when being dominated. And, as you say, Guardiola's lost 3 of his last 5 meetings with Conte across all competitions, including that epic one we saw in February. There's a lot of chatter that Spurs aren't as good as we probably expect them to be. But as you say, Sully, I think this kind of just feels like the right environment, the right opportunity for them to sort of show what they really can do. They went to Anfield, remember, last year as well, and took a share of the spoils in the title running when Liverpool were absolutely on top of their game. And I just look at that forward line, whether it's Son, Kane, Kulusevski or Richarlison, they can cause all sorts of problems in counter-attacks and transitions, as they did in this meeting last season. So I anticipate something similar, particularly when you look at Man City's defence. I'm sure at least 2 of these players will be fit and available, but Laporte is out, and there's doubts surrounding Stones and Walker as well. So, both of those missed midweek. Walker, if he is unavailable, that's a massive blow in terms of recovery pace for that back line. I'm kind of keen and interested to see the team news coming out before Saturday, because there's potential to sort of take that line, not just +1.5, but possibly +1 or even +0.5, because, we know City are a different proposition going forward this season. Pretty ominous at the Etihad as well, but they are outperforming their expected goals by some distance, and that's not all down to Erling Haaland either. So, they have been slightly overperforming. We've seen, Conte will have seen and studied the matches against Newcastle and Aston Villa and the potential ways to thwart them. So, Tottenham tactically will be as good as Man City this weekend. It's just whether they've got the opportunity, whether they're clinical enough to take their opportunities when they do come. So, yeah, I'm going to back them to stay competitive in this game. I think +1.5 goals is lovely. I think the market will say otherwise. The data says otherwise, but I think everything sort of what we see with our eyes suggests that Spurs can be competitive.
Adrian Clarke, your body language is exceptionally receptive to Mark's angle. So you're backing Tottenham +1.5 as well?
That's right. Yeah, I think Tottenham in 1.5 goals is better here. They're underrated in the market. Tottenham, no doubt about that. Mark's rattled off all the stats there. Conte's got a great record there. Spurs have got a great record against Manchester City. What I would say to sort of be on the other side is that City have won 7 straight games at home and they've scored at least 3 in all of them. So to stay competitive, Spurs might need to get a couple of goals, but you wouldn't write them off of doing that, would you? I agree with Mark. I think a depleted City defence up against one of the best attacks around, if they're aggressive on those counters, and I believe they will be. Take your pick as well, by the way. Richarlison's come in the Champions League and shone, and in the Premier League. So on form, you'd probably leave Son out, wouldn't you? You'd go with Richarlison, Kane, and Kulusevski. So it'd be interesting to see who he does pick. But yeah, when you run at this City defence, when you catch them cold, they're not the best. They really aren't. And I think Spurs can cause some problems in the game. So yeah, I'd back everything that Mark said there and say that Spurs can make it competitive. Don't necessarily think they'll win the game, but they're capable of running City pretty close, in my opinion.
Miguel, you're coming at it from a slightly different angle here. You fancy both teams to score at 178. What's the kind of thought process here?
Well, I mean, just looking primarily to last season's game and also a previous Conte game against Pep Guardiola. In fact, his first, which is the same scoreline as actually it wasn't exactly the same, but similar sort of situation as the February game, which is when Chelsea beat City 3-1 in December 2016. And again, it just seems to follow this pattern where, I mean, and it ties into what some of the lads have been saying, that Spurs haven't been that convincing this season, but still picking up results. But I think part of that is because of the kind of tonal shift in how they play, where it still suits. I mean, Conte, to be fair, he's a pragmatic coach in the true sense of the word, in that he has played kind of really high pressing, proactive games and has played reactive football. With this Spurs team right now, it seems like it's a bit of a hybrid, but that they're actually at their best when the other team is at the front foot and they can counter. That's been the case in these City games, but I think just because of the quality of the attackers and the intensity they play, because I do think games like this actually elevate something in Spurs as well, as we saw last season. I think because of that, it'll just be a high quality, high application game where both attacks score. But I think it's almost law of averages. It just puts me off going for a Spurs win again, because surely Conte can't keep doing it to Guardiola, and Guardiola will come up with something different that just tweaks it slightly. And Haaland does present something different in that regard. Yeah. But it's why I feel it's a bit safer maybe for both teams to score.
Yeah, Pep's never lost 3 straight games in a row in the league to anyone in his entire career. Yeah. So Spurs are sort of chasing a little bit of history here. Yeah, it'd be some feat. It really would. But
I suppose the only thing slightly similar to that is he did lose 3 games in all competitions to Tuchel, didn't he? But then in the very next game against Tuchel, after he lost the Champions League final, and there was all this big thing made out of it, he actually completely tactically killed Tuchel in a 1-0 win at Stamford Bridge last season. So as you say, you'd have to think Pep will just come up with something different.
Yeah, we'll get to Tuchel in a while, but he still won the big one, of course, in that kind of battle between the two of them. All right, I think Spurs plus 1.5 at 1.9 is the general consensus here. Don't dislike both teams to score here, but I can see Spurs personally putting it up to the City. And again, look, if they lose by 1 goal, we get full payment, so can't say fairer than that. Let's move on. Arsenal versus Everton. Arsenal are short. They're favourites at home. What do they do as favourites at home, Mark O'Hare? 1 word.
Win.
Win. There you go. Good man. 1.37. You come back to Gunners here. Everton at 10.5. The draw available at 5.6. Everton getting a 1.5 goal start at 1.95. 2 3/4 is the total, and shaded towards the over there. Adrian, obviously, look, we're recording this on Thursday morning. We don't know how Arsenal done Europa League on Thursday night. They're going to rest players, I would imagine, but let's look back at last Sunday. I don't think it's going to set them back in any way, really, is it? There's a good performance there, and they should have plenty for Everton there.
It was a decent performance. Yeah, I wouldn't say it was great, I wouldn't even go as far as to say it was good. I'd just say it was an okay performance. They didn't play poorly, but ultimately they did get beaten by three mistakes, really, for all of the goals. So that's the frustration. They have to tighten up against Everton, although Everton haven't scored more than 1 goal in the game yet. Big reliance on Anthony Gordon, by the way. I was looking at this. Shots on target in the Premier League this season. He's had 13 shots on target, Anthony Gordon. Only Mitrovic 15 and Haaland 15 have had more. So he carries a little bit of a threat inside the final third. And Gabriel Jesus, if you sort of a fan of historical success against the team, well, he loves playing Everton. He's got 8 goals and 1 assist against the Toffees. So that's exciting for Gooners. I think with Everton, a few creditable draws in a row. You know, they've done well. They've shown fight, spirit. They're playing for Frank Lampard, but Pickford's been good, hasn't he? He's been pretty busy. I think they've outperformed the XG against by quite a lot. I think they should have let in over 10 goals. Instead, it's about 6. So I think Arsenal will create create chances. Arsenal got an amazing home record against Everton as well. So this is a fixture that they tend to win. It's just, I think for me, when I look at this game, I believe that Mikel Arteta will all week say to his players, clean sheet mentality. Do not give them anything because of what happened at Manchester United. So that will be the message. And considering Everton are low scorers, I think Arsenal are capable of keeping their first home clean sheet of the season. It's going to happen sooner or later, and I think they can do it against Everton. And I think they'll win the game, even though I don't expect a rout here. I think it'll be a workmanlike win for Arsenal, but I don't expect them to be breached. So yeah, if you can get Arsenal on side and BTTS no for 2.24, which certainly boosts your odds on an Arsenal victory.
Miguel, you're in a similar thought process with this one as Adrian.
Yeah, there was a lot of praise for Everton last Saturday. I thought that was kind of only really worth it from a kind of a dogged perspective. I'm still not really convinced by Everton in attack. Obviously, to be fair, they've got their issues as strikers, but I think there's a bit of a long-running issue with Lampard, and I'd actually have questions on how he sets up an attack. And for that reason, as well as the fact that I think something we've discussed in the show a bit, or I've discussed, I suppose, I think just that inclination for managers to kind of almost go the opposite way after a setback. The fact Arsenal was so porous last week, I think, as Adrian said, he will be asserting that to his players, and I just fancy quite a resolute Arsenal win here, where they look solid, not quite back to basics, but just a mixture of those two things feels, I think, a clean sheet's a good bet.
Mark, in terms of a bet here with Arsenal, like the guys have made the case about the clean sheet, but are you kind of slightly worried with your selection? Your selection, full disclosure, Arsenal at under 4.5. Are you kind of worried there's a potential for an Everton goal there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of backing the team to win to nil. It's just one of my things, really. An own goal, a deflected effort, anything can happen, a penalty. It's football, isn't it? So I just like to try and keep my bet alive for as long as possible. So you take a worse price for sure, but I think you just get a little bit more on side. So the only thing really holding me back, we know all about Arsenal and their record at home to bottom half teams as strong odds on favourites. But the only sort of thing going for me in terms of the numbers is just 5 of Arteta's 51 home Premier League games have featured 5 goals or more. We know Everton aren't exactly the most forward-thinking proposition, but I think they have stiffened up defensively with Cody and Tarkowski there. We know Pickford's had a fantastic season so far, but I think Everton can be quite difficult to beat, and Arsenal are still missing Thomas Partey, and we've seen the numbers behind him when he's in the team, when he's out of the team. The points per game and the goals against do sort of creep up and down with and without him. So, I mean, we know Everton are pretty powder puff, so they should really fail to score here. But I'm just sort of being a bit more pragmatic, and I guess that's my way.
That is your way, Mark. Yeah, and it's why you're a profitable punter. However, Adrian, I'm going to side with you on this one. Look, Miguel's showed is very similar. Home team clean sheet. So even if it's a 0-0 draw, you still get paid there. But I just do fancy Arsenal to get the job done. So Arsenal to win with a clean sheet is 2.24 at Matchbook.com. That's just under 5-4 in fractional terms. So let's lock that in as our play here in this one. All right, Miguel, it's a game that you have titled as El Sackio. I like that one. Chat during the week. Leicester against Villa. And I suppose if we're looking at it, we would have thought that the next man out, before Tuchel got the bullet, would have been, Rodgers or Gerrard, but it didn't come to pass. The betting, I don't know who you want to make favourites here, but you got to make someone favourites. Leicester at home, 2.56. Villa, 3.0. The draw could be a runner here, 3.6. Quarter of a goal start. Villa getting a 1.82. 2.5 is the total. Miguel, you're going to do it. Leicester going to get the win here, according to your good self. This is brave, ballsy. Go for it. Make the case.
It's all remarkably high. As you say, I mean, it just shows how kind of chaotic the summer is. The season so far has been. In that it was Tuchel that so abruptly went before all these managers, given the pressure they're under. But I think in these sort of situations, we could. I personally find you can almost get tricked into kind of finding the last 3 or 4 games dictating out. Ultimately, teams like this generally have to win sometime. And with the way it's all feeding in, Leicester at home, I mean, I think some of Leicester's fixtures have been awkward. Some of the circumstances have played against them. Whereas this, it's a game between two struggling teams. Villa, I suppose you could read it that the way they came back against City might instill a bit of resolve, but I'm still not very convinced by them. And I just think the way these sort of teams play, almost a sense that kind of if Leicester don't win here, then they're a really bad team that we're talking about, someone that could be going down with points. And I don't think that's the case, no matter how problematic the situation is at Leicester, because there are big problems, but I think they're better than that. And I think this is one of those games between these sort of struggling sides where there has to produce a winner. And I think Leicester's greater quality and the fact they're at home will tell.
Mark, as a better Miguel picked it up there. Like recency bias is a kind of big thing for a better. It is very hard to kind of sit down and watch those couple of Leicester performances, especially against Brighton, and then part money with them. But it is Villa, so there's kind of for and against. I know they got that result against City, but in terms of bet for a way in here, Mark, what do you think? Where do you think the value is? You couldn't be with Leicester here, right?
I'd be with them more than Aston Villa. That's purely down to the price, though. They're trading close to 2.6, and the market's clearly saying that Aston Villa are the stronger of the two teams out of, based on those prices. And I disagree. I think they're absolutely banging in the middle compared to each other.
But just very quickly on that, so do you kind of think the market has reacted to the Villa getting a result against City? Because if Villa had lost 3 or 4-0, which we thought could happen, it could be a very different story here with the price.
Maybe, but this is a long-term thing. The market seems to really rate Aston Villa under Steven Gerrard. It's not just this weekend. It's almost every weekend they're going off a lot shorter than you should expect compared to what they're producing on the field. But I agree with a lot of what Miguel said, really. Leicester have had a tough schedule. They've met 3 big 6 teams in Brighton who have been going great guns so far this season. But yeah, the eye test is not encouraging. I was impressed with what they did in forward areas against Brighton, with Vardy out of the team and Daka and Iheanacho, I thought performed pretty well. But defensively, individually and systematically, they are just a complete mess and easy to play against. Aston Villa, I thought, were quite fortuitous to play Man City last weekend and pick up a point. I think City, their accuracy was just off in that final third, particularly in the last half hour. Dominated, didn't have the finishing touch with the final ball. Really should have won that match. They conceded 3 shots and Villa scored with their only on-target attempts. But I'm not reading a huge amount into that. I still think they've underwhelmed for a long period now. They've had a softer schedule. I know they played Man City before. Their first 6 games have come against teams 12th or below at this early stage, and they've looked flat. But I think the KP is an advantage for Leicester here, but I'm happy just to sort of take the emotion out of backing either team and just support goals, because neither team's kept a clean sheet this season. Surprised that the goal line here is trading at 2.5. It's 1 in 13 of Leicester's last 18, as well as 5 of their 6 this season. They've kept 2 clean sheets in 19 Premier League games, and both teams have scored in 15 of those. Aston Villa have scored in 16 of 22 away since the start of last season, but kept just 6 away clean sheets. 59% of those games went over 2.5, and 64% of Leicester's home ties have gone over 2.5 in the same sort of period as well. So if you look at the price, it implies around a 53% chance that we see 3 goals or more. And I'd almost always back that blindly in Leicester matches, because it should be at least a 2 3/4 line. If they were a Bundesliga team, the line would be 3, just a flat 3 every week, because that's what Leicester do. There's goals in their games. So I just think, where are these two teams' strengths? Absolutely going forward. Where are these two teams' weaknesses right now? Absolutely defensively. So chuck in the El Sackio nature of the game. Both teams will see this as a winnable opportunity. Should be quite open, quite expansive, and winner takes all.
Adrian, what are you making of this one?
Yeah, I do agree with Mark that we should see goals, because neither team can defend, and they've got firepower at the top. And Maddison's having a good season in a poor Leicester side. See, it was interesting, wasn't it, that Vardy was dropped for the Brighton game, going with Daka and Iheanacho. Will that be a pattern that we see continue, or does Jamie come back into the team? Villa, I mean, he doesn't know his best team, does he? Is it going to be Ings and Watkins, one of them? Is Bailey going to play up front? There's a lot of unknowns. Obviously, with both teams coming off losing streaks, I think Leicester's 5, isn't it? Villa 4 in terms of away games. I just feel they want to stop the rot. I just can't. I can't really pick either side here. So I've just landed in the middle and gone with the draw. I just think this is a match that neither manager will want to lose. I think they'll be desperate not to lose it. I get what Mark's saying about winner takes all, and it's there for them, an opportunity. But when push comes to shove, that they'd probably take the draw and move on and survive another week. That's, of course, if Brendan Rodgers wants to survive another week. There are rumblings, aren't there, that his heart isn't in it anymore. There's a lot of reports coming out of that club that a change is definitely in the offing. I think Steven Gerrard is desperate to cling on to that job because he doesn't want the setback of getting sacked. But with Brendan Rodgers, I think he, especially with a vacancy at Brighton, potentially in the offing, would his head be turned by that? I wonder. He has been linked already. So it's a bit of a distraction at Leicester. Yeah, but for me, I can't lean on either side. I would go with a draw, but that's as much because I'm not quite sure what's going to happen in this game as anything. So it's a real hard one to call. Genuinely, anything could happen. Villa could go down and win 3-0. Leicester could annihilate Villa. More than likely, it will be a messy but even game.
How's the feeling of that? I think this is a no bet for us because there's 3 different opinions here. But just to clarify, whose opinion is whose? Mark likes over 2.5, 1.88. Miguel likes the Leicester win at 2.56, and Adrian, I wouldn't say fancies the draw, Adrian, but you just can't. You're looking for the value selection. It's 3.6. Yeah, exactly. It's over 5-2. That's where the value lies for you. All right. We move on. Fulham against Chelsea. Now, this is a West London derby, Mark. I'm positive of it. Leave Brentford out. We know that isn't. And Fulham at 4.7, Chelsea at 1.84. The draw available 4.0. Fulham getting 3/4 of a goal start at 1.88. I'm not totally sure where the away team's total is in there, but I think the main goal line there currently is. We'll find out in a second. I think it's 2.5. I'll double check that in a second. But Miguel, I'll come to you in a second. Yeah, 2.5. I slightly shade towards the over. Mark, I'll come to you in a second in terms of bet here. Miguel, I don't think you have a selection there, but I'm not going to say I told you so. But I did say it last week about Tuchel, the cranky Tuchel, and obviously, you covered it there in the Independent as well. This is something that has kind of been running throughout the summer. They didn't have a sporting director coming in, Todd Bowley and Clear Lake. They thought that Tuchel could do it. He didn't really fancy it, and they just parted ways, and that's it. That's the way it goes. But it would have come at some stage. I just get that sense with Tuchel this year. It just wasn't going to be.
I mean, there had been issues bubbling, and even I wrote on my piece that as recently as kind of it was the 29th of August, someone involved in the situation was telling me like the literal words were, "He won't see Christmas." That said. But that's one of those kind of predictions just based on the way things were going, not knowledge of actually what they were thinking, which is why I think the speed of it was such a surprise more so. And I think it's more so when it came and the actual merits of the decision, a week after the transfer window and after one admittedly very bad result, but to act with kind of that swiftness, and it's ironic given that they gave him more power than Abramovich gave any manager ever, and he had have acted with quicker speed than Abramovich ever acted. And yet, while I think some of the criticisms of the ownership are fair in that it just does seem illogical to basically shape a team according to a manager's ideals and then give that squad to someone else. There's also the wider issue here in that Tuchel is a genius, but that genius tactical insight or perception comes with a lot of difficulty. And it's why kind of his spells of success at clubs have actually been quite short because people get a bit worn out by him. That's one of the things I was told. And I think feeding one of the things I was told about Chelsea right now as well, just as the player, he's just not having an effect anymore. They're all like even training sessions have been interrupted by debates over interpretations of roles. Tuchel himself has been difficult, particularly with the hierarchy. And because of all that, I actually find this game impossible to predict for all sorts of reasons. Because I think in these sort of circumstances, it can go one of two ways. Either squads can tailspin without a manager, or else they can actually suddenly be free. They can tailspin until they get a proper manager in and they have the authority, as we've seen with Manchester United, or else they can suddenly be released because they don't have the manager above them anymore. So I think just Chelsea are such an unknown quantity for this game that it. And on the other side, like because of the way Marco Silva plays is so dependent on the opposition. Well, what's he actually preparing for this weekend? He doesn't know himself. And the other side is, people might have noticed I was checking my phone as we were speaking there because it looks like Potter's been agreed. But again, if it is agreed, and we expect him to be in place, he'll at the very most have one training session with these players, which isn't exactly enough to kind of put in place any sort of Potter way. It'd be vague. So just because of all that, I think it's so difficult to read from either side, and it'd be more kind of going on gut on how players emotionally respond to an unknown situation.
Here's my very quick take on this, because I don't want to come off this and want to stay on the betting kind of theme here for a second, Miguel, but I might bring Adrian after we talk to Mark in terms of a bet. But I kind of followed the baseball a fair bit, and Dave Roberts, who's manages the Dodgers, who obviously his team, he's a very kind of amenable, friendly, kind of a bit of a yes man, so what's the inside of Potter? Like, obviously they weren't going to kind of put up a Tuchel and maybe his moods and his control or whatever else, but is Potter that kind of type of manager, or is because I just don't know enough about him personally to know if he'll actually align well with Bowley.
Well, actually, I think from everything we hear, and especially all this talk of a cultural reset at Chelsea, I mean, one of the biggest issues they had with Tuchel was that they didn't feel he was, he just wasn't fully plugged into what they wanted. Whereas, and I know this has happened in the discussions with Potter, where it feels like they have just a total fit. He's exactly the sort of personality they want. So, I mean, that might address some of the bigger criticisms of the owners. It's still a bit of an unknown. But actually, I must say, maybe this goes against some of the prevailing wisdom, I would probably be more favourable towards, or more positive towards this whole situation from getting rid of Tuchel to bringing in Potter and what it can do for Chelsea in the medium term than maybe some other people are.
Okay. Marco, here in terms of a bet here, I don't think much has changed for you since Tuchel has gone, right? I think you were kind of fancy taking on Chelsea here either ways, because Fulham have been so impressive this season.
Yeah, they have. I feel this is a good opportunity for them. Obviously, the news of Tuchel moving to Potter has happened a lot quicker than I probably anticipated it to. So it will have a bearing on things. But Fulham were well beaten at Spurs despite the scoreline last week, and Marco Silva was very unhappy with his team's performance. But at the Cottage, they've been impressive. This is a big derby game. I'll give you that, Sully. And they'll be fully tuned up for it. So they've offered a lot going forward. They've attacked teams. They've shown real menace. They've shown physicality, energy in midfield. They've been an awkward proposition. And it just felt, particularly before and after the Tuchel sacking, that this was a potential banana skin. Early kickoff for Chelsea, straight off the back of a trip to Croatia, where they absolutely flopped. Defensively sluggish, just lacked cohesion. The midfield was lacking invention. Forward line was anonymous, misfiring. 3 defeats in 7 across all comps. Conte still missing, and I think that presence in midfield has been lost. They failed to keep a clean sheet since the opening day against Everton, and their away performances have been rank, just outfought and outmaneuvered by Zagreb. Southampton, Leeds just bullied them. But yeah, there is always that worry that the new manager bounce kicks in, and as Miguel says, they play with freedom and a new sense of purpose. So yeah, you've got to guard against that. So I did have 2 selections for this game. One was Fulham +3/4. The other one was both teams to score. I'm going to drop Fulham +3/4 and just back both teams to score instead, because as I say, Fulham have been a force at the Cottage, all energy. They really went for the jugular against Liverpool. Turned over Brentford more convincingly than the score suggested, and then dominated Brighton, it must be said, which takes some doing, in fairness. So I think there's enough evidence so far this season to suggest that Fulham won't take a backward step in this match. Overs has landed in 5 of their 6 games since promotion. Both teams scoring in 5 of those 6 games as well. Chelsea have seen overs in 5 of 6. Both teams scoring in 4 of 6 Premier League games. So yeah, I fancy Fulham to score, because I don't think that Chelsea defence has finally sort of found itself just yet. But ultimately, you'd expect Chelsea to put up a bit more of a show than they did midweek anyway. So, and they do have individual quality, even if it's not clicked together just yet this season. But let's be honest, Chelsea have been poor for a long part of this season, only by that sort of Spurs match if they really sort of came to the party. So we have to expect them to sort of find their groove at some point soon. So it might be this game now with the managerial change.
Adrian, maybe not in terms of the both teams score selection, but I think you're in agreement with a lot of Mark says you're quite happy to take on the Blues here.
Yeah, but I wouldn't argue against Mark's pick, to be perfectly honest. I think Fulham are perfectly capable of scoring, and Fulham's rearguard have surprised me in the way that they haven't capitulated in the way that I expected, but they're still not exactly watertight, and they're up against class players. I think both teams to score is a good shout, if I'm being honest. I wanted to go all in on Fulham just Fulham on the nose, purely on the basis of this is a great opportunity to get a decent price on what I think is an achievable upset. If Potter's there, obviously it changes it a bit, but he'll either be in the stand or he wouldn't have had chance to get his messages across. And he's quite a technical coach, Graham Potter. So I would imagine it would take a few weeks really to get all those messages across for them to start playing in the way that he really wants them to play. You just got to look at the body language. It's shocking. It is awful. And that it's so disjointed going forward. I mean, what's Aubameyang think? What's he thinking? Aubameyang, he's signed to play with his former manager, and he's like,
it's just out the door. But it's not just him. Like they bought players specifically for that Tuchel system. I know you're bringing in Potter, a couple of weeks. Why didn't you do this before the summer and then bring the players Potter wanted in to do that?
I think there was an element of
it really is.
I think there was an element of just kind of taking not calculated risk, but I think I've seen the line a few times in the last 24 hours about how, well, they should have just sacked him in July when these problems started. But can you imagine how that would have looked in itself? And it would have just brought criticism. There's probably no real good time to sack a manager in the first 3 months of a regime, unless you essentially do it immediately because you're just declaring. But even that would actually bring criticism. I mean, I've seen some kind of comparisons to the Newcastle situation with Steve Bruce, but that was different just because, it felt like it was such a kind of a moribund managerial regime, obviously. Yeah. Whereas Tuchel's a Champions League winning manager, regardless of any issues. Yeah. But there was probably never a good time to make this decision. But equally, it was the problems have become kind of impossible to ignore.
Adrian, just in terms of your selection there, would you be quite confident going with Fulham 4.8? But like the way I was looking at it was you can get odds against by laying Chelsea and keeping the draw on side as well. If you want to lay them at 1.85, the other side of that is 2.1. So that's not a bad option, is it? Keep the draw on side with Fulham?
Yeah, look, I'm struggling to hear you actually at the moment, Sully. So I'll have to. I was getting a bit of guesswork there. I don't know if there's something wrong with my internet, but yeah, look, I think that the percentage play would be to go with marks, both teams to score. But I just think it is a good opportunity to oppose Chelsea. The rankings, you look at their attacking play, ranking 13th for shots this season, 12th for shots in the box, 10th for big chances. They're not exactly carving opponents open. And Fulham are so in your face. Such a good pressing side this season under Marco Silva that I think that they're more than capable of getting in their faces and upsetting the apple cart. So yeah, look, I just a small play on Fulham or Fulham on half a goal. I wouldn't deter anyone from doing that because I still think Chelsea are there for the taking.
Yeah, look, I'm going to make an executive decision. I think we're just going to lay Chelsea at 1.85. We'll get the draw on side as well, essentially with double chance with Fulham as well at odds against. Let's take a look at the selections we have. So just before we get to EFL and European and best bets, insights.matchbook.com is where you can find all of these selections along with our sign-up offer. Details of that are at insights.matchbook.com or just search Matchbook Insights. We've Spurs plus 1.5 at 1.9. Arsenal to win with a clean sheet. That's also up with as Arsenal and BTTS no. That's a 2.24. We had no bet in Leicester and Villa. And for me, it's a kind of a late Chelsea opportunity. We could lay them in there, push the pink button at matchbook.com at 1.85. So you essentially get double chance with the draw as well. All right, Mark O'Hare, league leaders in the championship, Sheffield United beat Rotherham and under 4.5 total goals. Oh, that's you.
Adrian Clarke.
Is it? Apologies. Why did I say Mark? Wow.
Yeah,
Mark
got a
loves
couple
his
of
pick
picks.
too. Mark loves his pick.
I'm finding the EFL tricky at the moment. The patterns haven't really begun. We're getting a lot of up and down results, yep. So it's a bit of a minefield at the moment. I'm not going to lie, but I've seen Sheffield United a few times. I've watched them in the flesh. I've watched them on TV, several 90 minutes, and I like them. I really like them. I think Paul Heckingbottom has got a very good team there that I'll be very surprised if outside the top 3 this season. So Bramall Lane, they've just been imperious, 4 wins out of 4. They've won 3 of those with something to spare. And they're up against Rotherham, obviously local neighbours, much different budget. Lots to admire about Rotherham, but it's a bit of a step up. They lost 3-0 at Sunderland on their last road trip. They're a much better team at home, Rotherham. I think they've only scored once on their travels as well so far this season. So if you go on the logic that the most they'll get here is 1 goal, I would absolutely back Sheffield United to get at least 2. So I don't think it'll be a high scoring because it's the derby, because Rotherham are very sort of gritty and well organised. But Sheffield, any opportunity to back Sheffield United at the moment, and I'd be tempted to take it.
Head to League 2 from ESC. So Crawley and Gillingham, both teams score 1.83.
Yeah, I mean, these two are not exciting teams. Gillingham have failed to score in 6 of 7. What a miserable start to the season for Neil Harris. They just can't score. Crawley under Kevin Betsy, struggling as well. They had a good result in the Cup, but they've failed to score in 4 of 7 games. So effectively, they're the top 2 in the sort of blanking market. Crawley, the fewest shots in open play. Gillingham, the 3rd fewest shots in open play. So, it's everywhere you look, this screams low goals. I think the goal line's quite low. Didn't actually see a proper price for that, but BTTS no. It's an awkward one to back because you're praying for no score updates. It's not a fun one to get on side with, but I could easily see a goalless draw here, or 1-0 either way or 2-0 either way. Crawley's XG in open play is 1.89. They've had 7 matches. I mean, that's pretty pathetic, and Gillingham aren't a lot better. So, and for Gillingham as well, but both teams to score no has come in every game so far this season. So look, this one's a numbers-based one as well as what you see with the results. So, I think one or both will blank again here, and you can get it at 1.83.
Yeah, under 3.5 will go on the Acca, but it's probably going to be 5s on Adrian, so we won't worry about that. We'll throw it in somewhere with Wolves.
Yeah.
Mark O'Hare, Angers and Montpellier over 2.5. Stop me if you've heard this one before, but Mark is absolutely killing it on Matchbook Insights with Ligue 1. 10 selections so far to date, 8 winners, 1 push, 1 loss. He's on an 18% ROI from last season with his column. Mark have built it up. Just give us another winner in France, mate. Just make the case. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, I think unfortunately the secret of Ligue 1 seems to be I think a lot of people are cottoning onto it. The fact now it's been quite entertaining. A lot of goals, a lot of overs, a lot of beating.
I've heard. Can I just cut across, Mark? I've heard somebody using these tips on American channels. I won't say who it is, but I think somebody's copying it. I'm just going to say it. The Americans
right.
are getting the American betting public are getting into Ligue 1 now. So there you go.
Well, they should. It's been quite entertaining, and I think we've got 2 of the more entertaining teams in terms of goals output meeting, Angers and Montpellier. In just raw number terms, I know it's not the best way of sort of extracting value, but I just think it's interesting. You put these 2 teams' records together this season. They've played 6 games each, so 12 games overall. Overs has landed in 10 of those. We've had over 3.5 in 9 of those 12, and over 4.5 in 5 of those 12 matches as well. Both teams have scored in 8. They've scored collectively in 10 of those 12 and kept just 3 clean sheets. And those 12 games are averaging 4.25 goals. Small samples, obviously, but pretty overwhelming stuff. And I've talked on the show and talked to my insights column about both teams fairly regularly so far this season, as well as last year. And Angers have had a difficult summer, very difficult start to the season defensively. They've conceded 17 goals already. Were hammered last weekend. They do show enough in attack to suggest that they can cause a Montpellier team problems. A Montpellier team who are always pretty expansive, pretty front foot, do leave the door open. They've been going great guns despite having their sort of key playmaker Teji Savanier suspended. He's back this weekend, so I've got no qualms with Montpellier going forward and scoring goals. They could score multiple goals themselves in this match, but ultimately I do not trust them defensively away from home to keep the back door shut. So overs was 1.9. It's already sort of creeping into 1.86. It's just in terms of percentages, the league averages and these 2 teams individually, the odds are just kind of a miss really compared to where they should be right now. And I would not be surprised to see that sort of trend down way below 1.8 before kickoff on Sunday.
In La Liga, Cadiz, 4 games in, 10 goals conceded, no goals scored. And so they're lucky enough to take on an informed Barcelona side this weekend. Barcelona -1.5 to win by 2 goals or more. Yeah, that's just seems almost one of those ones too good to be true, doesn't it?
Yeah, I wouldn't normally back a handicap away from home in this kind of range, but it just feels like the time is right to sort of click that button and get involved because, I think first things first, people will say, well, Barcelona are playing Bayern Munich in the Champions League next week. They're going to rest and they're going to rotate. But just look at their substitutes bench in the last couple of weeks. There's enough quality throughout the team to come into the first 11 and do a job and do an impressive job. And I think just to simplify matters, Barcelona in the last fortnight or three have gone to Real Sociedad, gone to Sevilla, arguably two of the sort of toughest away venues in La Liga, and just demolished both teams, won comfortably by 3 and 4 goals. Now, as you say, going to Cadiz, bottom, yet to score, yet to pick up a point, lost by 2 goals or more in 3 of their first 4 games. It's pretty ugly, really. So, they're averaging 0.32 expected goals through those first 4 fixtures and 1.86 XG against. The fact that Athletic Bilbao came here and won 4-0, I mean, no one concedes 4 goals at home to Athletic. They've lost comfortably against Celta and Osasuna as well, so they've hardly been sort of faced with La Liga's best teams so far. So, I mean, they just look a bit all over the place, out of their depth right now. And I think Barca, obviously coming off quite a genteel midweek game against Pilsen, they've just got enough firepower, whether starting or in reserve, to come into the team and do a cushy job here. So, wouldn't be too surprised if Lewandowski's left out, but if he is, I mean, happy days, they should hack up.
Yeah, it was so funny you say that because when Torres scored that goal, it was almost one of those, oh yeah, I remember they signed him last January from City. You just forget these before, all the other guys came in during the summer. They're a serious step there now. Miguel Delaney in Serie A, I think they were top last weekend before they took on Udinese, lost 4-0. So it's been a good week listening to Jose Mourinho around Rome. But you fancy him to get a clean sheet against Empoli and it's 2.48. Is it one of those kind of things similar to Tuchel when the team coming off a bad loss? Yeah, same kind of.
Not just similar to Tuchel, but Mourinho very much set a template for this. I remember seeing it so often when I covered him for Chelsea and Spurs, especially given when these sort of results happen and when it's a proper humiliation, Mourinho takes it more personally than any other manager. So what is his instinctive reaction to that? It is to lock up so there's no chance of Jose Mourinho being humiliated again. And I think that's why there's often been this kind of back and forth in Mourinho's career, where anytime because there have been, for all I think the justifiable criticism of Mourinho over the past years, there have been times where he's looked to kind of expand a bit, but he can't go against his instincts because he's just that kind of openness really spooks him. And it's for that reason I think we'll see a really locked down Roma display and kind of very vintage Mourinho defending. I can't see anything other than that. So yeah, I would think that's. I was actually surprised the price, relatively speaking, is quite high.
Yeah, and again, Roma clean sheet. If it's a 0-0 draw, you used to get paid anyway, so it doesn't make any. It's just under 6-4, 248. All right, so I like that option as well. Don't forget, Matchbook Insights will be recapping all these buzzers. I know we're rattling through. We're kind of running out of time here, but Mark, your best bet from League One: Peterborough to be Forest Green, and over 1.5 total goals, 2.1.
Yeah, just attacking a price I feel is too big, really. Okay. Peterborough haven't had the best of starts to League One football. They've lost all 3 away days, and there's been a lot of criticism about their glass jaw away from home. Sort of took the lead and still lost against Derby and Portsmouth in back-to-back away trips, and fans have been a bit frustrated. But I think when they return to London Road, they just tend to be pretty reliable, and I'm more than happy to sort of invest faith in them doing another job. They're 3 from 3 at home this season. I know they beat Sheffield Wednesday and a red card impacted that game, but they absolutely sort of cruised past Lincoln and Morecambe at home. I expect them to do something similar against Forest Green. We're effectively backing them to win by any score. There's not one. Forest Green got a big win midweek against Accrington, only their second since promotion. They did concede 17 shots in that match, and if you look at their record when facing probably the elite teams of League One this season, they've lost all 4 games. I'm going to chuck Shrewsbury into that mix as well, because I think they're quite underrated. But 4 defeats from 4 against Ipswich, Plymouth, Sheffield Wednesday, and Shrewsbury, conceding 12 goals in those 4 games. So I think a trip to the team with the highest expected goals figure in League One is going to be pretty daunting. A posh team with Johnson, Clarke-Harris, and Jack Marriott fit and available, and dovetailing pretty well already at the start of the season. It looks pretty ominous to me, and I think I'm very happy to be taking odds against some posh to win by any scoreline if it's not 1-0.
Adrian Clarke, you're delving back into the Championship. Watford to beat Reading at 175. think you're on mute, son. If you can hear us, you're on mute, mate. That's okay, mate.
There we go. There we go. Yeah, I like that bet. I like that bet from Marco here. I think that's a really good one. Yeah, Watford to beat Reading, like it's a pretty straightforward bet. I just think that Reading have been the surprise team of the season, but it's a false position in my opinion. I still look at them and think sooner or later they're going to nosedive. They were battered by Sheffield United 4-0 in their last away game. They've already lost 4-0 at Rotherham as well. Lost at Blackpool. Most of their better results have come at home for Reading. But look, credit to Paul Ince. They're punching above their weight at the moment. I just feel they're up against a Watford team that now that they're out of the transfer window, we'll see what they're all about. They were a team affected and impacted by it more than anyone because Saha and João Pedro were in and out of the team. 1 minute they were going here, there and everywhere. The next they were staying. No one knew what was happening. Got a new manager as well. Everything will stabilise from here on in, I think, for Watford. And in João Pedro, they've got one of the players that I think can be the player of the Championship this season. I think he's outstanding. Got some real solid players in midfield, Chowdhury, Kayembe and co. And yeah, I just see Watford having too much quality for Reading in this game. And to get them at home, at a backable price because of Reading's success so far this season, I think gives you an opportunity. I just think this will be the match where we actually see where both teams are and that Watford are quite superior to the Royals. So, yeah, I'm just going to go for them on the nose. And I think it might kickstart a run for Watford.
I know it's only a couple of games into the season, but that Reading league position at third, that seems misleading. I don't think they're not a promotion.
They had hardly any of the ball. I mean, that's not important because you can be good on the counter, and I think they have been. They've just been efficient at set pieces, things like that. Most of the metrics tell you that Reading should be mid-table or lower. Watford are one of the top teams in the division. By the way, Watford already this season at home have beaten Sheffield United, they've beaten Middlesbrough, and they've beaten Burnley. If they can do that, they can definitely beat Reading.
Who did they lose to at home?
They lost to QPR. You know that full well.
I didn't even know that, and I knew that. Why would he even ask? All right, Miguel Delaney. Miguel Delaney, I think you're going for 4 or 5 best bets in a row, so no pressure here, mate. When you do these positive goals ones, you normally have them up after about 30 minutes. So if I could have this settled in my account by 3:45 on Saturday, it's Southampton, please. Yeah, I don't even want the second half. Southampton and Brentford over 2.5 at 1.85.
Yeah, I'm near it. Look at it now. Did he go higher?
No. Stay here. 2.5 is fine. It's fine.
No. I think both teams have been involved in high-scoring games this season. It's the nature of both their systems. 2 high-pressing teams in different ways. A lot of open space, a lot of frenetic football, and it's very rare games. Again, to break it down to the purest numbers of all, when you have the ball bouncing around like that, it's very rare that it doesn't find its way into the net on at least 2 or 3 occasions. That's before we get to the quality of these 2 teams and what have both been kind of quietly good starts to the season. So yeah, I think this will be an entertaining game and a high scoring one.
Yeah, hard to disagree with that in any way. All right, guys, great stuff as ever. You guys are back Monday morning at 9:30 to cover the Champions League. Good winners last week. Please cover Bayern and Barcelona. I know Dan, the host, gives you guys the choice again, so please one of you pick Bayern and Barcelona, because I want to hear your thoughts on that one. Game of the week for me. All right, Adrian, Mark, Miguel, thanks as ever, gentlemen. We'll be back next Thursday for the weekend football. Like I said, the lads will be back on Monday morning at 9:30 with Dan, looking at Champions League match day 2. If you're watching us on YouTube, thumbs up, click the subscribe button. Or if you're listening to us on your podcast app, please leave us a preferential review. Until next week, best of luck with your bets and goodbye for now.